Hello, welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I have Jerome Saltmarsh on with me to talk about Gamestream. Now, Jerome, I don't even know how to even say what is Gamestream. It's like a game that you created, right? That has multiplayer support.
Yep, that's right. Well, it's one game at the moment, but actually, it wasn't. The idea wasn't limited to just one game. The idea was I wanted to make a whole platform. So the name of the platform is actually GameStream. But so far, I decided just to release it with one game just to begin with.
Okay, that makes more sense because my understanding was that the app was called Gamestream. Maybe I misunderstood kind of the announcement video that you had.
No, that's just the name of the website where I posted it. But yeah, as I said, the idea is that it's going to be a platform and just for all multiplayer games because the engine is primarily like a multiplayer driven engine. And the idea is that it's like you can play it straight through the browser, which I really like. So you don't have to download anything. You can just go straight to the website and then you kind of jump straight into a game.
Well, we can get more into that part, right? I don't even know where the heck to start because, like, my understanding when I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is a really cool game. And I thought the name was a little bit strange, but now I understand more about why the name is called GameStream because that's the platform, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I actually had all these different names for that game, and I had it written there, but I realized because I released with just one game, I didn't even need to give it a name. So yeah, I know it's a little confusing, and there's a bit of a disconnect between those two. But I think that would become more clear once there would be more options, and then you'd have the actual gaming.
So, what is the first game called actually?
Or well, the original name was called Bleed, like because you're like hunting zombies and stuff. So that was like the prototype name was Bleed. I thought it was a cool name, like because it's like a verb, so you're trying to like it gives sort of an action. I was thinking about calling it Blood at the start, but I think Bleed just adds more like oomph. Yeah, and in that game, basically, like initially, I had like all these huge ideas. Like I initially wanted to make like a sort of like MMO style Diablo clone, and that was the vision in my head. But I had to like really reduce the scope if I wanted to release anything. So basically, I cut out all of the RPG elements, and now you just basically just join the server, select your character, and then you go. So I thought that was like a good like starting game where there's no, well, it's just like really simple.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like the style of just like, let me just start my game. For me, I like a story. I like to see what's the story behind it, what's going on. Like, why am I killing zombies? Where the zombies come from? But I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of the one of the outliers. But because a lot of people are just like, no, I don't care about the story. Skip, 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 skip. I want to kill stuff.
Well, exactly. Like that's actually kind of the point of it is that it's kind of instant gratification. So the idea is like you want to like you just jump on the website and then you jump in and you play like for a few minutes. Um, and that's kind of like the game stream idea. I was even kind of contemplating doing like mini games, and so you like jump into one and then you finish and maybe like swipe like in TikTok and then you get into the next one. So it's like a stream of different games, but they're all like multiplayer driven. That's kind of the heart. That's at the heart of the idea.
I've yet to actually try TikTok because it's been banned in Hong Kong.
Uh,
So I have never played with TikTok before, but I do a lot of Facebook Reels, but I guess it's about the same.
yeah, actually, I've also never used TikTok, but yeah, it's just that short mode of entertainment. Like that's where we're headed, right? Like it's all like short, instant, like dopamine hits.
Yeah, I like the short videos, but my only issue is like I keep seeing the same video and then like there's always a picture of some person I don't care about reacting to it, which not interesting to me, or the same skit done by different people. I don't know how many times I've seen people eat lettuce wrapped, whatever, or drinking lettuce wrapped Coca Cola. It's just I need something new, right? So maybe, yeah, I don't know about you, but like those kind of things of people repeating the same joke, it just gets annoying. So I'm hoping that like for Game Stream that there's going to be Of course, you can do the same game, but make it a little bit different, right? Which is what I think your game, the first game you have, I think is definitely different than what I've seen in terms of the visual presentation. I believe you said it's multiplayer out of the box.
Yeah, well, it started as like a side project, because I was just playing around with WebSockets in Dart. I was just like I hadn't done work with WebSockets before, so I was just following a tutorial on how to, set up a server, set up a client, and then I wrote a little simple Flutter application, um, and and then I got it to work, and then I saw the client and server talking to each other, and it was just like this magical sort of moment. Um, and then I was excited to see, like, what can I do with Flutter? How can I use Flutter to embrace this and make this cooler? And then the next thing I did is I worked out how to deploy the WebSocket to um, like Firebase, Cloud Run rather, which is like the Google Cloud hosting service. And then I just got like it basically just rendered like a dot on the screen, and you could like move it with the arrows. And then I got that working, and I called up a friend. I was like, go on this website and like press the arrow keys, and then I logged onto the website. I could see them like moving the dot around, and it was just incredible. And at that moment, I was like just addicted. I just wanted to see like how far I could push that idea, and like that's what turned. It's like moving like this little white dot around the screen turned into like that 3D isometric like light, dynamic light, the game that you see now basically. So and that took about 1.5 years to get to that point.
So 1.5 years.
Yeah, well, it was a side project at the start, so I wasn't working full time on it, because I was working full time. So I was just like getting 2 hours in the morning. But the problem is like that's all I wanted to work on. It became I became addicted to it.
Wow, that's a long time. But I mean, maybe we can kind of roll back to about like what were you exactly doing for 1.5 years? Because I mean, the game looks really professional.
Thank you.
My question was like for 1.5 years, right? You started from a dot to a game that looks very professional. What exactly were the steps to go from the dot to where you are today? Like what were kind of some of the milestones?
Oh yeah, okay. It was a process. There's quite a lot of systems, independent systems, all kind of working together. The first thing I had to do was get the lag down, because I started off with sending everything in JSON, for example, because I'm used to writing like REST services with JSON, which is fine if you're writing a REST service, but JSON's like not very good for a game because it's really wasteful. Like the data is just totally blown out. So I basically had to I got rid of the JSON and I replaced it with just like the byte stream. And so I had to write this byte compiler and parser. I was reading a book written by one of the Dart authors, and he published this book online on how to create a parser, and I read it like a month earlier, just kind of out of interest. But I realized that could be applied to the game as well, like that same technology. So that was like a real keystone for me. It was, and like a real like learning point was like how to send bytes across the network in a really efficient manner. So that's kind of like the lowest level of the Gamestream like platform. Yeah, and that took like quite a while to get that all working. The next thing was it didn't start out as like a 3D game. Like it started out as just 2D. If you go on the YouTube channel that I posted, you can see like some of the really early builds, and it's like at like the 3 point mark, um, and it's a completely different game. You have just have little stick figures running around. So like in answer to your question, like that would be a good way to see like the progression. After the 3 month mark, for example, you can see the graphics weren't very good at all. So once I got that, like, because I kind of realized like the most important thing is like that it's fun, and so you can't have any lag. Like the main approach of the system is that it's like fun first, not so you don't need like a really strong graphics card or anything like that. And what was really important to me was that it would like play smoothly. So I really spent a lot of the first months just learning how to reduce a lot of information into just bytes, basically. And there's quite a lot of like tricks you can do to compress information, like even into a single byte, for example. And these things, I just sort of like figured them out over time. Like, for example, with one character, the character has like a state, like what are they doing? Are they like standing or are they running? And they have like a direction, and they also have like a team. So if they're like good or evil, but and initially I had all that information like spread out, but actually you can compress all 3 bits of information just into a single byte, just by shifting the bits. So for example, like there's only like 8 different directions, so you don't need like all 8 bits of the byte to represent the direction. And the same is with the state. So you can squish all of that, just like compress it all together. And once I kind of figured that out, that was like a really big like aha moment for me. And then I became like really obsessed with that. That became a game in itself. Was like learning how to squish, because the bottleneck is the network. And so I became like really obsessed with just trying to figure out how I could squish everything together to really small. And I think now it's like if you measure it, it uses like 10 megabytes an hour or something, which is really pretty optimal. Or maybe like 20, but anyway, it doesn't use much, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about like what information did you consume, right? And actually more about this article because that sounds super interesting about like using bytes to encode lots of data as opposed to going like the JSON route.
Well, I could maybe send you the link and then you can like post it into the description, for all the different like resources that I like looked into, because it really helps a lot, like um, as a programmer learning how to manipulate bytes, like especially like using like bit shifting and bit masking and all that. You can actually do quite a lot of cool tricks. It's only really in game development though, where you need to optimize everything. You probably wouldn't use it in a typical app. But if you're interested in creating a game, then it really pays to learn. And Dart has really good support for bit manipulation, so it makes it really easy.
That's interesting. I never would have thought about using Dart for bit manipulation. Um, yeah, because I mean, the original reason for Dart was about kind of a better JavaScript, right? So I'm kind of curious about why they have this ability. Like, where did it actually come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just JavaScript. I mean, it's a general purpose language. So, I mean, you can write a server with it as well. Like, actually, the whole game is written in Dart. I wrote the backend and the client, um, which I love. So you don't have to like um, swap languages. And basically, what I did is I just created like a common library which is used by both, um, and that contains all of like the messages that you can send back and forth. So you don't have to like duplicate anything between the projects. But yeah, I'll definitely send you the name of that book. Um, I think it's called like Crafting Interpreters.
Oh, that's by Bob Nystrom, right?
Well, maybe I don't remember his name, but it's really interesting. Yeah, so basically, I spent like the first chunk of the effort was really dedicated just to getting the like networking like really solid. And then after that, I started working more on the lighting, and building up like basically the graphics engine. And what I was going for was, did you ever play Diablo 2?
Oh, I've never played that game now. I've heard of it, but I never played with Diablo.
Yeah. Well, I played it a lot as a kid, or like Age of Empires, maybe like number two. Um, well, basically, like all those games, they use like this style of graphics where they take a picture of 3D models in different angles and then just create sprite sheets out of them. And like that's sort of like it's not used anymore. Everything is 3D now. But I love that old style. I think I'm not sure if it's nostalgia or if it actually looks good, but to me, I think it looks amazing. Um, so, like for example, they released the Diablo 2 Resurrected, and all I was hoping for that was like the old style graphics, but with like better resolution. But they didn't do that. They made it all 3D. And so I was like, wow, I would really like to play like those old school style games with like those old school kind of style graphics, but with the convenience of just playing it through the browser. So that was kind of like the motivation for building it. Also, it was just really fun to make. So basically, I didn't know Blender before that, so I had to spend a lot of effort learning Blender, just to model all the characters. And then I created the camera which like rotates around the model as it performs all of the different like actions, like be shooting or just whatever. And then you create this big like sprite sheet, um, of all the different angles. Um, and then that's when the Lemon engine. That's what I built the Lemon engine for. Is that it can like really quickly render sprites basically, and it like batches them all up automatically. So it's really fast for rendering sprites.
So I was just doing some looking while you were talking about Diablo. Like, so it's just real time strategy games. I mean, I'm a big fan of Red Alert and Age of Empires, like you said.
Well, yeah, they all use that same. Yeah, I still can't see the camera by the way, so I'm not sure if that's working.
Okay, I mean it should be good now, but maybe some problem with the app or something. But I can see it up on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, that style. You mean talking about like that realistic style of the sprites moving like that?
Yeah, well, I probably wouldn't call it realistic. Actually, the point is that it's kind of not realistic. That's what I love in games, like when they're not trying to be realistic, because like you're trying to like escape reality, right? It's not trying to duplicate. So I prefer that. Like if you're kind of like inside of a drawing.
Yeah, to me, maybe I like a little bit more realistic, right? I think I like a little bit more realistic because I kind of like living out fantasies of real life. Like, what if I did this? What if I did that?
Yeah.
In like Age of Empires, it's kind of like, okay, what kinds of things were around in Brown's age and etc. I think that I don't know. I'm a kind of a history fan too, so it is kind of cool to see that style. But I can understand like escaping to another world and having the things happening that just don't happen in real life, just so to kind of escape and see what it's like to be in another world, right? Is that kind of what your mindset is when you're playing something like Diablo and this kind of style?
That's right. Yeah, it's like a fantasy thing, right? It's a fantasy world. What else? The lighting engine was maybe the most difficult thing because it's a dynamic lighting engine, and Flutter doesn't have come with any sort of pre-built system like that. So I kind of really had to like just figure it out all kind of from scratch. But I really enjoyed doing that, just like solving those sort of problems, and even like casting shadows and that sort of thing. And obviously, it has to be really fast because, I mean, there's like thousands of sprites being rendered each frame, and it can support like a lot of light sources, which is actually pretty difficult to do. Like, if in Unity, for example, you have to be pretty careful how many light sources you have on the screen, like direct light sources, because that'll like kill your game. Like real quick. And it doesn't even support that many. Like even just more than a few, you'll like notice it lagging. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. Like it can support like a lot, like over 100 fine. Um, doing like real time shadows and like real time lighting on the characters. So getting that all to work like really efficiently was a pretty big challenge.
So I kind of like to go a little bit into your past because it sounds like you've already had quite a bit of experience making video games or even video game engines. Is like, what is your background in terms of video games?
Or like producing them. It's always just been a hobby, actually. I never did it professionally. But that's actually sort of like something that I want to do, or like that's kind of the end goal for this project is to like, yeah, set up a whole platform. But I originally started, do you remember XNA from, it was a C sharp library? This was like before Unity had come out. There was this library from Microsoft called XNA, and it's pretty much how I learned to program. Was just like playing around with that, and it was really uh, like it wasn't a whole game engine. It was more of just like a rendering engine, um, but it was so much fun. Um, and I didn't create anything serious. It was just um, like silly ideas. I didn't like publish anything on Steam or anything. But that's kind of where I got started. And then after that, I like tried out Unity, um, and I did the same thing. I was just made little this little fun projects on the side. Um, but actually, I do have one game which I had been working on, which I've sort of put on the back burner. But it was. Do you know what ASMR is?
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, it's kind of like I wanted to make sort of like a relaxation game using Unity where you just kind of like walk around and then you hear like different sounds as you walk around and then just like solve puzzles. So that was like another project, which I want to get back to it in the future at some point, but I kind of like left it at the moment just to focus on this one because it's too much work to try and like do too many projects at once.
Now, is that also written with Flutter or using another game engine?
That was actually using Unity, so that was C sharp. But I love Flutter. Like I especially I really liked Dart. Like I've been a Java developer for quite a few years, and I've done JavaScript and TypeScript. But to me, like Dart is personally, it's my favorite language. Especially now, Dart 3 just got released yesterday, so that's got a whole bunch of more features, which I don't know. I think it's a really good language. It's so much fun to use. So I definitely I couldn't see myself switching back to Java or JavaScript or something like that.
That's interesting. Like, what do you like so much about Dart? Because Dart is kind of a newish language. I mean, I don't hear a lot of people, other than people who write Flutter, really love Dart. But like, so somebody who kind of played around with JavaScript, C sharp, what makes Dart interesting to you?
It has the flexibility of JavaScript, but also like the structure of Java. It's kind of like a nice in between because Java for me is too verbose. It's too like you need to write a lot of code to get anything done. JavaScript, on the other hand, like lets you do anything. It's like Western cowboy, like lawless. So it's powerful, but I think it doesn't lead to good like software structure. And so Dart is, to me, it's the perfect blend of the both of those philosophies. And it's also quite like it's both functional and object oriented. So you can like use both depending on the situation. Whereas, for example, Java is just object oriented. It doesn't support like functional quite as well. So yeah, that's what I really like. You don't need to write like a whole lot of code to express something really powerful. And also, like Google puts out really good documentation for Flutter and Dart, which I really like.
Yeah, and I think they have some pretty good coding standards. Like there's a dart.dev, I think is the official site of Dart, and they have some really good tips on there, and they seem to really go for really good developer tools, so I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Well, what is your experience with Flutter? I mean, this is called Flying High with Flutter, so
I've looked at wanting to use Dart for some things, and it's still something on my list, but I think that definitely Flutter has made my life much easier in terms of creating desktop apps. So we've actually launched a couple of desktop apps because of this. It's made life easy because all of us in the office are all using Macs, because of course you cannot create an iOS app without a Mac, so you have to have a Mac. You can create
right.
both sides. So even for like Windows apps, we can just usually create most of it just on a Mac and then handle like the edge cases when we kind of deploy and test on a desktop Windows, right? So that's definitely helped. Creating reliable apps for mobile has been really easy. I think Swift now has null safety, but it didn't have it before, I believe.
Right.
I think Dart kind of came first with that. Kotlin's definitely brought things forward in terms of like making a better Java-esque kind of, Java experience, Java development, the Android development experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that Flutter has been fantastic for us, and we're going to continue to use it, and we're deeply invested in it. I mean, obviously, we're still making podcast episodes and still talking about it, and still kind of doing stuff in the community with it. So, the only thing that I have a problem with is I feel like, I mean, maybe this sounds a little bit, I don't know what is the right word, hypocritical to a certain extent, but I wish Dart was more on its own, right? Because now they definitely conscientiously release new Dart updates with a new Flutter update. And I think that only kind of locks Dart to be more of a Flutter language rather than being its own language. Like you said, yeah, it's a general purpose language, but at the same time, not everybody's using it that way. It's kind of like Ruby and Rails to a certain extent, but Ruby has its own schedule and Rails has its own schedule in terms of release.
Right.
But most of the time, if you're doing Rails, if you're doing Rails, of course you have to do Ruby. But if you do Ruby, you probably also do Rails.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
As opposed to you're a Java developer, right?
Well, not anymore.
You've done Java, right? And
yeah,
like
I was, yeah.
Java doesn't release according to struts or I don't know any kind of other popular Java framework, right? So it really is its own language.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think because Flutter I think it sort of saved Dart because Dart was going to sort of fade off into obscurity until Flutter came along and then, picked it up and gave it a purpose. So I think that's why it's so strongly coupled. The language and the framework are so strongly coupled because without Flutter, I think it wouldn't be nearly as popular today.
No, I remember like the only thing that comes to my mind was have you ever done anything with actual websites besides making the APIs? Like, do you do any of the front end development work?
With Java?
No, I mean, just talking about, do you ever do like front end development work in terms of like creating HTML, CSS pages?
I mean, I did Vue as well.
Okay, but have you ever used Sassy CSS or SCSS before?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's written in Dart. It was rewritten. It was first done in C, C++, I think, or I think it was first done in Ruby. Then it is C, C++, and then they ported over to Dart. And I thought that was the weirdest thing because at that time I didn't know what Dart even was.
Right.
That was quite some time ago, and I thought that was kind of stupid. Like that was my first thought. I was like, "That's stupid. Why would you choose this language?" I mean, I didn't know anything about Dart, right? And but
Yeah.
knowing that it compiles to JavaScript, okay, that makes sense because that's huge for front end, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so like in terms of that makes sense, right? But at the time, I mean, like my first thought was why Dart, and I'm sure there's other Dart projects I have to go looking through, but that's the first one that comes to my mind. That was my first kind of introduction to Dart, and then I've heard about Flutter a few years later, and I was like, okay, that's using Dart, and it's like, well, why Dart? That's really weird. And
Right. Yeah, and I have to learn another language. Yeah, I was also a little like, yeah, weary of like jumping into a new language. Kind of want to, because I was sick of working as a backend developer, and I wanted to switch to the front end. But I just didn't really, I really didn't enjoy JavaScript. Coming from Java and going to JavaScript is quite challenging because it's just too like wacky. And then and that's when I sort of found out about Flutter. And I was like, oh, do I want to like learn Dart, like learn another language? But then I like started looking into it, and I was like, oh, this is a great language. Like, so and Flutter was a great framework. So it was pretty lucky that it turned out that way.
yeah, I mean, I think that I'm along with you. Like, I don't quite understand all this. I'm not a huge fan of JavaScript. I find it quite painful. I was working with a project today with React and what was it? React and Redux, and I thought this is really complicated for doing something because of the way. I mean, maybe it's been the way that the app is structured, but I feel like okay, I got to make a slice, and I have a feature, and I don't know if this is the right way that everybody does it, but that's the way the app was done, and I feel like it's very complicated. And JavaScript itself is already a little bit complicated because you have a lot of weirdness from many years ago, and
Yeah, it's super strange.
it's difficult to like it's you have triple equals and it's like what.
Yeah, exactly.
But I
Also,
understand.
it's like a prototypical language. It's not a classical object-oriented language as well. So that's like a whole different paradigm as well. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I honestly think it doesn't make. I think if all you knew was JavaScript, you'd be sort of at a disadvantage.
Well, yeah, but I mean the other thing too is like I like the things that I'm happy that Dart is still moving forward, and I like what they're doing, and I'm liking that they're adding in pattern matching all these things because I do use a functional language basically every day, and that one has pattern matching on it, and it just makes life so much easier. I barely ever have to use if statements anymore. And I feel it's just like so much more expressive and so much more beautiful compared to running a bunch of if else statements and everything else. And so I'm happy that they're doing all this stuff. I have to get used to the new style because it's not clear to me right away. Some of the changes that they or some of the new features that they added in that's not very clear. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, but some of them are not so clear. But at least I'm happy that you can do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty happy with what's going on. I think if we had like I don't know if you've ever seen a union type before.
No, is that a Dart? Is that one of the new Dart features?
No, as far as I know, it's not in Dart, but like Rust has this kind of thing where okay, so a perfect example of a union type, if I understand correctly, is you have something called a maybe type, and that's kind of like an abstract type, and maybe is either something or nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you try to grab something from, say, like an array or from a map, then you're either going to get something or you're going to get nothing, right? And
Right.
so you have to handle both cases, which it does get a little bit verbose, but at the same time, it does make your code better in terms of you actually handle errors, right? So like the null safety, sorry.
Right. I was about to say that. Isn't it the same thing as like making something nullable?
In this case, null safety, it does do that kind of case, but you can do a lot more than just that, right? So like imagine database relationships, right? You can have so many different types, like one to many to one, many to many,
Right.
and you can pattern match on that kind of case and handle all the different situations. So if you're doing something like a mermaid or a diagram, and you have a relationship between things, you can be very specific about, okay, if the relationship is this, or one of these cases, this is how it should work.
Yeah.
So you can be a lot more complete with that one.
Are you talking about Rust?
Yeah, Rust has this kind of thing with the result type.
Yeah, I haven't learned Rust yet. It's actually been on my list because it's a lot of people talk about it.
Well, it's super useful, like the result and option type, because you have to handle both cases. You can actually force it to not handle it, but I mean, it is nicer to handle it because, yeah, I mean, you don't want your stuff to crash, right? So you want to be able to handle stuff, as opposed to if you have like the way Java is working now, as far as I know, unless things have changed, you have to check if something's null before you use it, or else you get a null exception.
Yeah. Or do you mean like, yeah, or Dart for that matter? Yeah, that's true.
Well, Dart has the nullable type, right? So you have to see if it's null or not. You can't just, unless you can add the bang to it to force it, but yeah.
Oh yeah, you're not supposed to do that. But yeah, that's true. You still have to check if it's null. But that at least then, like the typing system is quite powerful. I think like if you've checked something is null and then like if it is null, then you return, and then after that line, it knows that it's not null anymore. So it's pretty powerful in that sense.
Yeah, but the new syntax we have, I think you can do similar stuff. I don't know. In any case, you mentioned about this, like, yeah, I think the new changes are really great to have. And I'm curious to see what else is coming to the future.
Mm.
But kind of coming back to Gamestream, right?
All
Are you
right.
planning to open up your Gamestream platform for other developers to add more games to it?
Oh well, I mean, that would be pretty hard. I mean, yeah, maybe. I would have to like write quite a lot of documentation explaining how the system works. It's not like you could take a separate game and just. I mean, are you talking about like specifically multiplayer games here, or even just like single player games? Because a single player game you could pretty easily just sort of pop it in, but integrating a multiplayer game, um, you'd have to use like the engine to build it. So I would have to like write a lot of documentation explaining how to, like get the client and server like talking. It would be pretty hard to get like a third party game and just like plug it in at the moment. I mean, that would be pretty amazing. It's actually something a friend of mine said. His idea was if I made sort of like a quasi like game maker in the browser, and then you could like create your own games like in the browser. That would be pretty hard to do. I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but that would be sort of like one possibility. Kind of like, did you ever play Warcraft 3?
I haven't played Warcraft before.
Okay. Like basically the map editor for that game was just incredible. So you could build like a map and then you could program all this like logic into it. So that would be like one possibility. But that's sort of a different route than like releasing all the code and then getting other people to contribute to it. So I'm not sure which way would be more simple.
Yeah, that's either one's quite difficult. I guess you
Yeah,
have to work with some other developers and have some kind of trust system.
yeah,
I mean, like, what's next on your roadmap for GameStream? Is it that you're going to be making updates to the first game still, or are you going to actually start to work on the next game? You call it idea, but the next game, I think, is what you're talking about.
yeah. Well, good question. Because actually, I released that first game, but I think it's not like fun enough because I didn't like keep like player retention. Like people like went on it and like played it and checked it out, but it wasn't fun enough to like grow a player base. Um, so like I need to figure out how I can make that first game more fun, so that like people come back to it as well. But like since I published that, I was like, I just need a break from it. So because I worked so hard on that first game, um, so I'm just sort of like taking a bit of time before I get back to that one. Um, I do have like quite a lot of ideas. I also wanted to I started working on a prototype, porting that game to the mobile. Well, actually, if you go on the GameStream.online on your mobile, it it's already deployed. Then you'll like get the mobile version. But that's like the idea for the mobile version was more of like an MMO style game where you like persist a character. So I wanted to like build up a whole world, but the scope of that is just a lot bigger. At the moment, it's just in the prototype stage. I kind of just wanted to see if I could get the controls working. So yeah, like feel free to like jump on the web, like on the mobile, and then there's like two options. One's called Chase, and the other one is the MMO game. But I also have like quite a lot of other ideas. I'm sort of like leaning more towards the short game style of content. So I was kind of thinking of creating a game like. You did play like Smash Bros, Super Smash Bros?
I was more of a Sega guy growing
Oh yeah.
up, but no,
Well,
I
just
haven't.
any old fighting game. So basically, like something like that. It's like just a platform where you jump in and then you just beat each other up. It's like a 2D style game. Also, I think like with Flutter 3, they're releasing this new rendering engine. It's not going to use the what's it called again?
Impaler.
Yeah, that's the one. Um, and so I think that will have like 3D support. Um, so then you could actually like create 3D games um, with Flutter as well. And I always wanted to make like a DMake. Do you know what a DMake is?
No, I haven't heard of it.
It's like it's a genre of games that people make where it's like a low quality version of a game. Like if you go on YouTube and you look up like Halo DMake, and there's like this Halo game, but it looks like it's being played on like a Nintendo 64. And I love that idea. So I don't know, when I was in high school, I used to play Halo online, and it was so much fun. So that would be possible as well, like to make like just like a 3D sort of shooting game. I basically wanted to just create like one game of all the different genres, and that way you can go on the platform and just like play whatever you feel like. Um, that'll be a lot of work, but that's kind of like where I see it going in the future. So I'm pretty excited for them to like release. It's not released on the stable branch yet, and I don't think it's for web just yet. But I'm sure that's coming pretty soon. So like as soon as they release that, then that I want to like play around with those 3D options.
Yeah, I seen the example from I don't know if it was IO or what. It was quite some time ago where they were showing like they brought in a blender, like was it Dash, and it had like a ton of them, and they were able to rotate and all this kind of stuff. It's like true 3D basically. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good, and it's all running through like the WASM, how do you say that WASM, like the WebAssembly. So it's brand new, like this technology. So it's really cutting edge. I think that's really exciting. Like the amount of possibilities that's going to open is just crazy.
Yeah, so it seems like Flutter is really I mean because before we have like the 2D, with forgot the game engine now. But with this one, right? I mean what you have so far, it's still basically a 2D game, right? It's a 2.5 or what would you call it?
Yeah, it's 2D. It uses sprites.
Yeah, but it really seems like it has some, yeah, because it's isometric, it seems like it has some depth to it. So like I was like really kind of blown away. I was like, wow, this is really nice.
Yeah, well, actually, the game takes place in a three-dimensional space. It's just rendered using 2D. Um, so it is just sort of like a cross between 2D and 3D because it uses sprites to do the rendering, which is 2D, but they're rendered inside of a 3D coordinate system, which makes it 3. So I guess you're right. It's 2.5D.
Like overall, I'm quite impressed that you can build this kind of thing, and it's cool that you built your own engine, right? And the engine, I mean, when I went through the code, it seems like there's not many dependencies. So that means you basically wrote a lot of the stuff just using Flutter itself, no?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I tried to keep it really simple. Yeah, I didn't want any crazy state management systems forced like into it or anything like that. So I even like made sure not to add a physics engine or anything like that. It's kind of up to the user of the engine, like what kind of game they want to make. So because initially I had like I had all that integrated into the Lemon engine, but I took it out just to make it really like generic. Yeah, I got some feedback on it. Someone wrote because I basically just used like statics everywhere in it because my reasoning was like you're never gonna have like more than one game. So some of the feedback I got was to not use all statics and to create more of like your like typical widget. So I might do that in the future. I haven't started, but I mean, feel free to like when you looked at it, did you try to run it or like create a little demo or anything?
No, I didn't have enough time to do that. Like I thought that because first of all, I was just doing some checking again before the show, and I thought that it was just source code for the game itself, but it's actually source code for the engine. And I was like, oh, okay, let me just see what he's using underneath. And first of all, I was like, oh, he's got his own engine. That's interesting because I thought you would just use I forgot the name of the popular game engine we have in Flutter.
You mean the Flame
Um,
engine?
yeah, the Flame engine. That was my first thought, and I was like, oh, it's not.
No, because well, I honestly just really enjoy the process of making it. I'm sure the Flame engine is really great, um, but for me, it's just fun to. I just wanted to do the challenge of making my own. But the other thing is that like I needed really control over how things were rendered because I mean there's like thousands of tiles being rendered, right? And um, and so the engine basically it's really well optimized. It doesn't create any new objects or anything. It just like it uses like a byte array basically, and then it just ships all of that off to the graphics card. So there's no like in between layer, which is what I needed. Whereas I think Flame it tries to do like a whole lot more. Um, like it provides a lot more structure, but it doesn't give you such like finite control over like what you're rendering, which is what I needed for my game.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, how long did it take you to kind of make the engine, and where'd you start with?
Well, I mean, I sort of like always just sort of like because initially it was just integrated into one project, and then I realized like a whole bunch of it was just boilerplate, so I kind of extracted it out and created the Lemon engine, and then I just always added to it as I worked on it. So it wasn't like just like but make that finished. It was like I worked on the both of the projects simultaneously. So like Gamestream is one project, and it uses the Lemon engine to do all the rendering.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's overall that's pretty cool. I think we're approaching kind of the end of our time, and I was kind of curious about is there any call outs from people that you want? Like, are you looking for more help on your game engine, or just more feedback on the game, or or how everything runs, or like, is there anything that you're looking for?
I think to get help on it at the moment it would be so much work to try and onboard somebody. But um, for sure, if I can get feedback on like the Lemon engine itself, or if people could just like try and make something like a little game and give me feedback on the Lemon engine itself, just to see because I think it's intuitive, but maybe there's things which aren't quite as intuitive. And another thing is just yeah, like playing the game on Gamestream and just give me feedback on how I can make it more fun. Actually, that's probably the most important thing for me moving forward is how can I make that my first game more yeah like just funner basically. So I'd really appreciate some feedback on that.
Well, I'm almost wondering if you should have some kind of achievement system. Do you have something like that?
Well, at the moment, what I added is just the high score. So um, that's pretty much the only achievement system at the moment. Um, so, but there's only one high score at the moment, and that like basically it just gets saved off in Firebase. Um, so that's kind of the only incentive. Like one possibility would be to add some like RPG elements, so you kind of like level up your character a bit, but that just adds a whole lot of scope. So I'm sort of sort of careful about that.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think achievements would definitely help because, like, for me, sometimes I want to kind of go back and see which achievements I haven't gotten and try to get those. So those are always pretty addictive, I think. At least for me, it is.
Well, one idea I was thinking of, like, because at the moment you can just choose any item, but maybe your score could be like the credits that you use to buy items. So that would give you an incentive to like increase your score, because when you die, then you can like make your character better.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah, but no, otherwise, and if anyone like is interested in it, or has like ideas or wants to, yeah, I don't know, then definitely feel free to like email me 100%. I'd love to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, how can people get a hold of you?
I'll send you my email address and then you can just put it in the link.
All right, no problem. Yeah, is there anything else we didn't get to before we sign off?
Not that I can think of.
Cool. And with that, I thank you for coming on, yeah, I'm happy that if we have another game engine, or even more games and more kind of stuff for the community to use to look at.
Mm.
We can attract more people to the Flutter community, to the Dart community, even. So that's pretty exciting. And with that, yeah, then thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you again in the future.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, it was great to be here. It was really good to talk to you.